Hello, it's May 26th, 2020 in Corning, New York. I'm Bill Gudenrath, and I'm here with another installment of what I call furnace glass blowing at the kitchen table. And today we're going to focus on a couple of things. We're going to focus on keeping soft glass on center, and then we're going to look at an exercise that can help you solve some of the coordination problems that occur when you're working at the bench. First, let's look at the centering issue. You have to keep the glass on center when it's molten. I guess that's kind of obvious. And you have to keep the glass on center even when it's barely soft. And all the times in between. Really good centering needs to become second nature, just as breathing is second nature. Absolutely done without any thought. Well, here we are with the honey and the chopsticks again, just like the first video. And it's going to be just like the first video where we gather glass honey on the end and just keep it on center. Let it get as long as you dare and just go back and forth. I suppose it's really a matter of keeping it the same degree off center, but get used to that. Be able to move around with it. Look away. Anything you can do to make this comfortable. Do it with two hands, like you do with a blowpipe or a punty at the furnace. This is great for internalizing that business of keeping the glass on center, even when it's really soft, and this is the hardest situation you have. There are very, very few times when you can give up that control and let the glass go off center and start to drip. Very few times. Let's look at them. When you hang a bubble straight down to elongate it, it'll stay on center automatically. This is making a Roman bottle, and if you hold a pipe straight down, you don't even have to turn it. It stays on center no matter what you do. And when you add molten elements from above, be they solid or hollow, as in adding a blown foot or a knot or a stem, here we let gravity have its way, and no harm is done. But these are exceptions. Normally, you're 100% responsible 100% of the time for keeping the object on center. I like to tell my students that every time you let the glass go off center, somewhere, someone accidentally steps on the tail of a cute little kitten, and we don't want that to happen. Let's look at some coordination problems that occur at the bench when you're working. We turn the pipe by going back and forth, right? We try to keep it turning as smoothly as possible, but it always stops twice. It stops here and it stops there. And that's a problem in two regards. The first, centering. You want to make the stop as brief as possible so that gravity has the least time to do its damage, distorting the object. I have a visual cue for that, a visual aid for that. I try to move like the right arm of a violinist. If you watch a really good violinist play, you'll see that they go back and forth, and at the ends, where they change direction, the bow doesn't seem to stop. Of course it does. It's a sort of an illusion. And it's worth looking at, and aim to be that smooth and to have your stops be that brief. When you look at this video, pay attention to how instantaneous that change of direction happens in. So again, make the back and forth as smooth as possible. No bumps, don't ricochet from one end to the other. No bumps, no pauses, smooth as you can. I mentioned a minute ago there are two things about this rotation business you have to pay attention to. We just talked about centering. And the other is the very important principle that you should only touch soft glass when the pipe or punty is turning. Then that's critical, because if you press on the glass here or here, you're going to make a bad dent. Whatever you're doing, whether you're touching the sides to make something cylindrical, whether you're flattening the bottom, whether you're making a maurice, if you continue the force when it's stopped, you're going to do damage. I only exert force on the glass while it's turning. Here, it's to shape the sides and to shape the bottom. In making a maurice, I only press and squeeze while turning. I carefully reduce the force before I get to the change of direction. I never really got good at this coordination until the 1980s. I decided to tackle the most difficult of all furnace forms, the feared and dreaded low bowl with curving sides. In the Renaissance, wine glasses with this shaped cup were called tazzas, T-A-Z-Z-A-S, and that's the Italian word for cup. This one's in the Corning collection. If you even think about tooling the soft glass during the stops, it's easy to wreck a piece like this. Now, if you watch the video carefully, you may have noticed that I accidentally did this once. Look what happens in slow motion. I recover it, but just barely. This is not my best moment on video, I'll tell you that. This coordination of timing the tooling force to only occur when the glass is turning is most acute in making lids. For me, forming the flange on a lid is the hardest thing I do at glass blowing, and it goes thusly. So in this lid procedure and in the tazza you just saw, it's essential, it's paramount to not touch the glass at the stops. You really have to learn that. And the sooner you learn that coordination, the better, because it helps in all aspects of your glass blowing. Everything gets better. Now in a moment I'll show you my little exercise for that coordination problem, and it will help you, I promise. And if you practice it while you can't blow glass, when you get back to the furnace, you will be better, I guarantee you. But let's take a moment for a brief digression. I grew up obsessed with helicopters. It was the late 50s, and helicopters were new then. The first viable commercial helicopters didn't come around until the late 40s. In fact, this helicopter was designed in the late 50s. It first flew in 1963, and the obsession continued, and finally, in my 30s, I gave in and I studied helicopters. In flying a helicopter, there are a lot of controls. In your left hand is the throttle. This increases the power of the engine or decreases it. This also controls the pitch of the main rotor blade. If you lift it up, you get more lift. If you lower it, less lift. The pedals control the pitch of that anti-torque rotor at the back. If you push left, the nose goes left. If you push right, the nose goes right. If you add power, the body of the helicopter wants to twist to the right, so you have to add left pedal. Now the right hand has this thing called the cyclic, and if you push it forward, the rotor disc tilts forward and you fly forward. Conversely, backwards, left, and right. And the tricky thing is that anytime you change one of these, everything else changes. And it changes at the same time, and you have to make inputs incrementally correctly to keep the helicopter under control. And that is really, really hard to learn, and it's very tricky. Well, my teacher was a guy named Will Prater, and he'd been in the Vietnam War flying Hueys. And Will was so good that he didn't strap into the helicopter, he strapped the helicopter on. He was magnificently skilled. And we'd go up, and he'd show me a simple maneuver, and I'd struggle, say, to climb. We'd be flying along at 500 feet, and he'd say, climb up to 1,000 feet, keep it straight. And I would struggle with all these different controls, and the helicopter would bounce around, and I did the best I could. We landed, and he said, let's shut down, and I want to show you a trick. I want to show you a little exercise. And he showed me this. This is what it has to do. This is what the controls have to do when you climb. You increase the throttle, you lift up the collective, the nose tends to come up a little bit, so you push the cyclic forward a little, and you push in left pedal, because when you add power, the body of the helicopter wants to twist to the right. And so it looks like this: to climb, to descend, that. Climb, descend. Well, we started up, went back up, and I was a lot better. I was still awful. I was a lot better, and at least I felt that I had a chance at learning this. So that's where the exercise came from. It came from helicopter. It works great with glass blowing. Here it is. Take a broom, pair of tongs, blowpipe and jacks, obviously. Get used to rolling back and forth. I have to push really hard to get the torque. And practice flattening the bottom. Push only while it's turning. Come off before you change direction. Imagine you're touching the sides to make a cylinder. Come off before you change direction. Now you don't have to come off, but lighten the pressure before you change direction. A really good thing to do until you get great at this is to come off completely. Practice a Maurice. Try a Maurice. You put the bit on, you flatten it, you make it slightly conical, make a groove, a blade on either side, and you squeeze only when it's turning. You don't do anything unless it's turning. You don't have to have the props. You can do this just in the air. It's harder, it's way harder just in the air. So move your hand back and forth as if there were a blowpipe or a punty, and flatten the bottom. Let's see, we held the jacks this way when we flatten the bottom. So flatten the bottom. Touch the sides. That's hard to do because when you come up, this tends to come up, but get really good at that. Completely independent hand movements. A Maurice. Back and forth, flatten the glass, make it slightly conical, a shallow groove, a blade on either side, and again, only squeeze, only exert force on the glass when it's turning. Stop before you get to the changes of direction. And the sooner you do that, and the sooner you internalize it, it'll make everything else in glass blowing easier. It'll make you more comfortable, so that you'll stop getting those flat spots and you'll stop getting crooked bottoms. All that goes away when you stop touching the glass when it's not turning. It's been about 2 months since I blew glass at the furnace, and I really miss it. You probably do too. Blowing glass at the furnace is a really physical activity, and your body remembers stuff like that. It's like riding a bicycle. You never forget how to ride a bicycle. When you get back to the furnace, you'll be almost where you were when you left off, after a brief period of adjustment. And when you do these exercises, do them when nobody's watching, because it looks a little wacky. They're great for you, but don't do it with anybody watching. By the way, it's a beautiful evening. It was a couple of days ago that we filmed the helicopter sequence, and it was a spectacular day. So I'm going to give you a little tour of the Corning Museum of Glass and its immediate environs from about 500 to 600 feet. I think you might enjoy that. We take off from Costa's Airport west of Corning. We're flying east, climbing to about 500 feet, going about 60 or 70 knots. And now we're approaching the museum campus. It's just about to come into view. And there it is. centered on the screen. On the bottom left is the Raycow Research Library. That's the library of reference on the subject of glass. Next to it, that long black roofed building is what we call B building, and at the north end of it, to your left, is the studio of the Corning Museum of Glass. In fact, you can see all of the air conditioning units on the roof. If we cross the parking lot, the building that really catches your eye is the 1981 Burkitt's building, and that's the building that contains and presents chronologically the history of glass, the old objects. Now just above it, and peeping out there, is a little rectangular boxy corner of the building that was the 1951 original building. It's been subsumed by subsequent additions. We'll see it better when we come around in the continuation of the flight. The white roof next to it contains the Innovation Center and the shops. There's a state-of-the-art auditorium inside there. And then the white building next to it is the most recently built addition to the museum. It's the Contemporary Arts and Design wing of the museum. And last, to the left of it, that oddly shaped black building with the curious roof, that was the original Steuben factory that was put next to the museum in the original 1951 campus. And a few years ago, it was turned into the amphitheater, and you may well have seen webcasts broadcast from there. We'll continue the flight now. We're flying east. Great view of the Burkitt's building. And we begin to turn to the north. You're now looking north. Another terrific view of the Burkitt's building and the original building, 1951. Looking west now down the valley, we took off just out of view to the west. That's the entrance, the main entrance to the museum right there you're looking at. And another really good view of the Contemporary Art and Design wing. Coming into view in the foreground is the headquarters building for Corning Incorporated that was built in the late 50s and was used up until 1994. Excellent view of the old Steuben factory, now the amphitheater. At this point we cross the river, and here coming into view is the current world headquarters of Corning Incorporated, a stunning building by Kevin Roche. And this tower right in the foreground is called Little Joe Tower, and it was originally used for pulling thermometer tubing. The area you're looking at where Corning Incorporated headquarters is was originally factories. We're flying over Market Street, the main street of Corning. That's the main entrance of the Corning Incorporated building. You can see Market Street below. It's the main street of Corning. That's Centerway Plaza, the heart of downtown Corning. We're turning to the north again, crossing the river, and we head west to go back to the airport. Another great view of the Corning Incorporated building. Hope you've enjoyed this tour. It was a beautiful day and it was irresistible. It's great there are these things that we can practice away from the furnace that will meaningfully improve our glass blowing when we get back. I sure enjoyed making this video. I sure hope you enjoyed watching it, and I'll see you the next time. Huge thanks to John Huff, the proud owner of N153GH. He was incredibly generous with his beautiful Sikorsky S300, and with his time and with his enthusiasm. I can't thank you enough, John.